Hello folks, here we are back with nucleic acids. This is the second video that follows the first video that was sent out on macromolecules. So, nucleic acids are also known as DNA or RNA. The elements that make them up are carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. DNA and RNA are in all foods because all foods came from living organisms, so they have some DNA in them. Function. DNA is really a storage place. It is the blueprint of life, which means that it holds the instructions to make all of the proteins that your body needs. It makes millions of different kinds of proteins and it stores that information. The monomer, the basic building block, is called a nucleotide, and there are 4 different types of nucleotides. So they all have a phosphate group and a deoxyribose sugar, and that's where DNA gets its name. But they have different bases. So if you look over here, one of these units right here is a nucleotide, and you'll see that this spot right here has an A, and that stands for adenine, and that's one of the bases. T is another base that stands for thymine. Notice that adenine and thymine always bond together. And then the other bases are cytosine and guanine, and they always bond together. When you put a bunch of nucleotides together, you get a polymer called a polynucleotide, and DNA and RNA are examples of polynucleotides. All right, let's go to present here. You can see those nucleotides a little better. So there's a phosphate group, the 5-carbon sugar or the deoxyribose, and then the base. So there's one nucleotide, and here's another one right here. Notice that these nucleotides are pointing in one direction and these are pointing in the opposite direction, which is a unique feature of DNA. All right, so big picture. DNA, your DNA is different from a fruit fly's DNA or bacterial DNA because there are different base patterns, or in other words, the nucleotides are arranged in different orders and in different lengths. So that's what makes you different from every other species on Earth. All right, big takeaways here. So there are thousands upon thousands of different types of polymers, and some come from nature, and then some of them we have man-made. They're called synthetic polymers. Plastic is a perfect example of that. Polymers have different shapes, and their shape allows them to do a specific function. And if there's a mistake that happens in that polymer, then that polymer won't function the way that it's supposed to. When you're looking at a polymer or any macromolecule, look at the number of bonds. The more chemical bonds that are present means there is more stored energy in that molecule. Your body and cells in general are the best recyclers. They are constantly breaking down or digesting polymers through the process of hydrolysis, and then building new polymers through the process of dehydration synthesis. And that's just constantly going in life all the time. All right, you need all 4 of those macromolecules, carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. You need all of them to maintain and build healthy cells. And the only way to get those is through food. So you really are what you eat, and what you eat does matter. All right, last slide here. Back to chemical bonds and identifying macromolecules. So if we look at this macromolecule A, notice that there are all of these carbons. They're in a chain. There are a lot of hydrogens, double the amount of hydrogens compared to the carbons, but there are only a couple of oxygens. So we have carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen as the elements, not in a 1:2:1 ratio. So that would tell us that this is a lipid. Because there are double bonds, that tells us that it is an unsaturated fat. All right, let's look at letter B here. This macromolecule, a lot of carbons, double the amount of hydrogens, and again, fewer oxygens. So we can also see that there are this molecule and then kind of these three chains, and that would tell us that this is a fat or a lipid. Okay, CHO, but not in a 1 to 2 to 1 ratio. This is a saturated fat though, because there are these long chains that are straight. All right, down here, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. And if we count them up, we're going to see that they are in that 1 to 2 to 1 ratio. So 6 carbons, 12 hydrogens, and 6 oxygens. So this is a linear form of glucose, and it is a carbohydrate. And then here we're going to look carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, more nitrogen there, and oxygen. So snow, that tells us that this must be a protein. And if we look at its structure, there is that amino group, there is that COOH group, and then here is that side chain group that makes it its own unique amino acid. So this is a protein. So when you look at all of these, which one has the most chemical bonds? Yes, letter B, this lipid up here. That's why when you burn candle wax, it will burn. You can put a, not that I'm recommending that you do this, but if you take a corn chip, it has a lot of fat in it. And if you light it on fire, it will burn for a long time because it has so many chemical bonds holding it together, and energy is released as those bonds break. Okay, now I know that is a whole lot of information. Keep calm and little chunks of studying. Watch this video again and again. There are lots of resources on the Google Classroom page. Good luck.